Hey guys, how you doing? So I thought we'd go through a game, what I just played. It's a 10-minute rapid, no increment, because there are some very interesting points where we can stop and set ourselves some little tests. So, from the top then, we have the Van Croix opening. I reply with e5. And now we have this. Now, I've had this a couple of times today where they've actually started with the Queen's Knight's pawn. Queen Knight 3 kind of move. So I'm unfazed. I'm expecting this bishop to come here, and you have to watch out for that bishop. You do. It's a sneaky little bugger, that sniper. So there he goes into his little nest. So I bring my bishop out to d6. All right, and now they're getting ready to do the same on the other side. So now I just prepare with my other bishop. Now this looks like a kind of unusual position, but in fact these bishops aren't too bad. You know, they are actually controlling quite a few squares in the opponent's half of the field. The knights can come to either of these two natural squares as well and provide double cover. Notice that these pawns are already defended ones, and we can build up a good centre here. So here we go with bishop number 2, please. Alright, so now one way to defend this pawn is to move the c pawn up. My knight's probably going to come here. And this bishop's already biting on granite down that diagonal. If I did the same on this side, then we'd have ourselves quite a fortress going on. Okay, they develop the knight, I develop my knight. They push h4, I push f5. Quite often a move I like to play, get the knight behind the pawn. I'm feeling kind of good here. Okay, now they've moved. Yeah, they've moved the developed piece a second time before completing development and before castling. But hey ho, this bishop actually has nowhere to go. So if this knight wants my bishop, it can have it. So I develop my queen and say, all right, Mr. Knight, what do you want? And the knight says, I'll have the bishop, thank you very much. I'll go, that's fine, I'll take back with my queen. Now at this point, I have to think, well, what does this mean strategically for the game? I've just given up the bishop pair, right? I didn't actually have a lot of choice about it once it came to it. So what do we want to do? Well, we want to close down the position. If the opponent's got two good bishops, then I want to minimize the strengths of those bishops, which means don't give them space to work in. Bishops work well in space. Knights can work well at close quarters. And I happen to have two horses, so that's what we want to do. Opponent now plays the, I think, very rash pawn to f4. So with what we've just said, what do we want to do? So the first move you'd consider would be to push e5 to e4 and lock down the e and the f files. That, however, has a bit of a downside, which is that you hang the g7 pawn and after it the rook in the corner. So that's not very good. So I don't do that. I bring my knight from g8 to f6 and say to my opponent, okay, basically you've got one opportunity now to trade here, and I'll recapture with the bishop or the knight. He doesn't do that, so now I push e4, right? He pushes again, I push again. This is fine. I'm quite happy to close everything down, lock this place down, okay? And notice we've got now a lot of pawns on light squares. I've got 7. I've got the giant pyramid of Cheops built out of light squared pawns, right? Which makes this bishop look a bit daft, right? Now, White now decides, he kind of recognises this. He says, look, my bishop's now stupid. It's literally got nowhere to go. All the decent diagonals are now completely controlled by Black's hedgehog of pawns, right? So he's thinking, what's he going to do? He's got a pawn break here, hasn't he? So he's going to try and bust through. Right, now, I castle. And here he comes busting through. Now, this is not the smartest move. If you look at it, I've got 1, 2, 3 attackers on this pawn. How many times is it defended? 1, 2. Okay. However, notice that one of my defenders of this pawn is in between the bishop and the rook. I did not notice that at this point in the game. I captured the pawn. Bishop captures the pawn. And this is not good for white. Stop here if you want and figure it out. Okay? I take, he takes, I take bishop. Right? So let's just rewind here. At this point in the game, we're equal. We've lost one minor piece each. Okay? I take the pawn. Now, the best move here for him is actually to retreat the bishop. Because what he's doing, okay, so, but with this move, he loses a minor piece. He wins a rook. He loses a minor piece. So he's just traded both bishops for one rook. And that isn't a good deal in anyone's money. And never mind the nominal value of bishops being, two bishops being worth 6, whereas one rook is only worth 5. It's 2 pieces. He's given up 2 whole pieces, which could prove useful later on. So actually, at the end of all this, I find myself slightly up in material. So now he moves his queen across. I think he's worried about this. I actually saw this, the fact that this diagonal, this lovely dark squared diagonal is now open. And who's left with a dark squared bishop? Me! Me! I've got a dark squared bishop, right? So the queen comes across maybe to guard this, I'm not sure. I move my queen across anyway, saying, go on then, what's your idea? He blocks with the knight. I attack the knight with my dark squared bishop. Handy. Queen comes out here. Now, interesting point, what would you do? Interestingly, the machine here says that although black is better, knight takes e3. If pawn takes... wow, then we can capture the knight with a royal fork. I did not see that. That would have been lush. That one's got to go in the old book, hasn't it? That's a really nice move. Okay. In the game, I decided to capture the knight because I'm up in material. Okay. Queen takes, and we trade queens. This is good. This is good for black. Okay. I love it when you go through a game and it's like, dude, there was a tactic there and you missed it, right? We've got to relish these opportunities. Like I said in the video earlier on, the fish gives free lessons. Let's take advantage of it. All right, so let's take stock. Okay, white has 2 rooks. We have a rook and 2 knights. However, we still have 7 pawns. Black still has 7 pawns on the board, okay? As does white. So this is not a wide open board. Also, this one's hanging. Okay, so he advances his king. I start to improve my knight, maybe. His rook comes over to hit my knight. I retreat the knight to f6. So he needs to open up the position. He needs to get into my position or behind my position with his rooks. Because if he doesn't, if I can stop all these pawns, then his rooks are just going to be wandering, patrolling the perimeter on the back of his own position. And my knights are going to start diving, ducking and diving, going in there, causing trouble, you know, messing things up. Now, in flies the rook. I bring up my king to d6. With just the idea queens are off the board, your king becomes more powerful, more influential. You want to centralize your king. You want to start to control the board using your king, not just your remaining pieces. Also, this rook here he doesn't need to stay there because there ain't nothing coming through here. So, rook now comes across to e5. Now is the time to pause and find the best move for black, which I'm very pleased that I found. Well, not immediately. The first move is knight e6, right? And now I see it. Now I realise that my opponent could be in a bit of trouble. My opponent moves his rook across there, and now the decisive blow. Pause and find it if you wish. Knight g4. This rook's trappity doodad, mate. The pawn covers these squares. This knight covers this square, and the rook itself is under attack. It's out of luck. So he comes here, trade, trade. Okay, so now I'm up a whole knight. Okay, but we still need to convert the position. Now, what is the critical part of the board? The critical part of the board is this f-file, okay? If white is going to have any chance in this game, he's going to have to get his rook up here, onto the 7th rank, and cause havoc. And maybe, excuse me, somehow use this pawn majority on the queen side to bust through and get himself a queen. If he doesn't do that, he's not going to last very long. Okay, so what does black do? Rook f8. Occupy the open file. It's a matter of critical importance. Rook slides across slightly. And I now spy that there's a loose pawn that he simply cannot defend. So he pushes a pawn, I ignore it. He takes, I decide to take back. Now I considered here recapturing with the rook and giving check, but I am creating an isolated pawn, and I figure it's not actually necessary. I think I can hold the fort, even if I block with my rook, right? Even if I put my king here, his rook can't get through. The way is shut. It was built by those who are dead, and the dead keep it. The way is shut. Another idea could be pivot the knight round, defended by this pawn here, and just really strangle the life out of the position. Okay, so I come back here. I decide that even if he decides to come over here and attack, it looks as though the knight is there and it's actually skewered on the pawn, but I've actually got rook h5. Proposing a trade, knight escapes, happy days. So he comes over and has a sniff at the open file. I'm like, oh no you don't. My knight guards this one, my rook guards this one. What he's got in mind is to come in here. So I'm like, no. Okay, very important, very common idea, using your king to guard the penetration squares for an enemy rook or queen. Very important, okay? In comes the king. Okay, I now bring my knight out with check. King comes across. Now, knight captures here, okay, because he's undefended his pawn. So, however, right? Look at this. Look at this. Moving my knight here, haven't I undefended this pawn? Well, obviously no, because if the king takes here, I can move my knight with a discovered check and win his rook. Okay, so you've got to be very careful about these things. Don't just go, oh look, free stuff, and stick it in your mouth. Don't do that. He didn't do that. He moved to c5, but he did undefend the pawn anyway. Now the rook comes across, h5. Simples. Okay, my knight defends this pawn. This pawn here is undefended. The knight itself is undefended. But also, these two pawns side by side, you know, you should be very, very careful not to push pawns and zigzag them and stagger them automatically in an endgame, because pawns side by side create quite a barrier. So here we've got quite a barrier. If this king wants to get to these pawns, he can't, right? Because my king's guarding these squares. He literally can't get through. There's no way through for that king, as long as these pawns hold their ground. Okay. So he comes and has a sniff at my knight, and I grab another pawn. And now, a fateful move. This looks good, right? Rook c3, he attacks my knight. So, pause, and what would you play? Can I save my knight? Should I move my knight? Well, the move that I found, which is simply the best move, is the lovely pawn to d4. Forget about the knight, right? We are not only upping the danger levels, we're upping the danger levels twice, right? With this discovered check and hitting the rook. And it's just beautiful. Because as it happens, there is only one square for the king to go. King can't come here because of the pawn. Well, it can't take the pawn because of the knight. Can't go here because of the knight. Can't stay on any of these squares. As already discussed, my pawns and king are guarding all these. So the king has to go here. Okay. Now, as it happens, I captured the rook with my pawn, and that was the end of the game. But there is a better move. Pause and find it. And the better move is pawn to b5, checkmate. So there you go. Every game is potentially packed with wonderful, beautiful, sexy old tactics. And although that was a real shit kicking, right? My opponent rated 1456, right? And he didn't play an awful game. Let's quickly just look at the... He played 75 accuracy, right? I played 84. So he did a 1350 game. So it's maybe, according to the report, a bit below what he's capable of. And I played a bit better. But the point is, still, in this game that we just saw, there were some really good revelations provided by the engine that I wasn't aware of, but that I can use to learn and that I can use to grow, and so hopefully become a stronger chess player. And I hope you have too. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. See you later.